Welcome to Debutante Renegade. On today's show, erectile dysfunction. But first, if you haven't hit that subscribe button, hit that subscribe button. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up, hit the notification bell, and feel free to comment. If you have a question or topic that you would like me to cover, shoot me an email, debutanterenegade@gmail.com. You can also find me on Instagram, Debutante Renegade. I love hearing from you guys. Okay, so on to today's topic, erectile dysfunction. First, let me just say I wanted to do a show on this topic because in a group that I'm in some various dating groups as a result of doing this podcast. As many of you know, I am very happy in a relationship with a partner. However, you know, in my ongoing fascination with relationships and liking to help people in their relationships and learn how to have the best relationship I can, I continue to do my homework and see what's going on out there. And I love hearing from people about their relationships. And then I also just love looking into what kinds of experiences people are having while dating. And so I'm in a group where it's people over the age of 40, and some of the men were talking about erectile dysfunction. And this was illuminating for me because something they were talking about as being erectile dysfunction to me was just known as, oh, that's just men in their 40s. So I thought I'm going to do a show on this. I'm going to do a podcast on this because I think there's some interesting things to think about and discuss as far as this is concerned. So if you look up erectile dysfunction and you go on Mayo Clinic or any number of different medical sites that you could Google or whatever, they'll tell you that erectile dysfunction is either when a man cannot get an erection at all, like full impotence, which to me, I would definitely clarify that as erectile dysfunction for sure. If you can't get hard, that's erectile dysfunction. But it also says that erectile dysfunction is if a man has trouble maintaining an erection. So that would also constitute erectile dysfunction. And I thought that was interesting because in my mind, you know, in my sexual experience, I find that, you know, once a guy gets past his 20s, early mid 30s, they will have instances where they lose their erection. And it's not anything that I did wrong or that they did wrong. It's just as a man ages and his testosterone changes or whatever, that just tends to happen. If you think about it from a biological imperative perspective, you know, human beings didn't really, for millions of years, we didn't live past our 30s. So the fact that men even still have sex drives after that, it's just, you know, it's like a prolonged thing. Same with women, like we really didn't live past our 30s. So we're not really in our childbearing years after our 30s, and neither are men. Like once we get into our 40s, we're technically not in our childbearing years. While some of us can still have children at that time, we're not really primed for it from a biological perspective. You know, really like our 20s is kind of the sweet spot for both men and women. So it's natural that a man's testosterone levels will drop and he's not going to have the type of erections he had in his teens and 20s. That's just biology. So being that that's just biology and that's just natural, I wouldn't call it a dysfunction if his erections are working a little differently. I would just call that natural. I wouldn't call it dysfunction. I feel like we live in a really unfortunate society where, you know, the pharmaceutical industry just has such an influence over people with its marketing and its campaigns, and we feel the need to constantly get different medications for different needs. And, you know, in turn, the pharmaceutical industry makes a lot of money. Sure, there are life-saving drugs out there that are incredible. And if you're on one of those drugs, I completely understand. And I'm so grateful that many of these wonderful drugs exist. But there's also a lot of drugs that are unnecessary that they want you to get. And I am in no way saying that erectile drugs are unnecessary. I think there are certainly candidates that need these drugs. And I think if someone's taking them and it makes them feel safe and comfortable and happy and have a great sex life, then that's great. But I think applying the label dysfunction to something that is just simply natural is kind of unfair. And I feel like it's really kind of preying on men's insecurities about their erections and their sexual performance. And I think our society puts a lot of pressure on men and their erections and their sexual performance. The way men are portrayed in society, they're supposed to just be horny and hard and able to perform all the time. And I think if a man has any other kind of experience outside of that, he somehow feels like a failure. He's not a man and he needs a pill to make it all better or something to that effect. And I just think that I just think men are getting the short end of the stick on this one. Most of the time, you know, I consider myself somebody who thinks that men are consistently put in a place of having advantages and privileges, but I mean things are changing. They've been changing the last couple of years. That's been flip-flopping, but this is one area where I think, you know, I would say I think men are being a little bit victimized by this terminology, erectile dysfunction. I think that this is being used in an unfair way and used in a place where it doesn't belong. You know, would you call menopause for women ovarian dysfunction? Like, it's your body's functioning as it's supposed to. Your ability to reproduce is supposed to stop and shut down. You don't want to have a baby when you're an old woman. That's just natural for your body. But if that was being called a dysfunction, women would feel like there was something wrong with them. So by calling this dysfunction, I think it's making men feel like there's something wrong with them. And I think that it is very natural. While not every guy in his 40s is going to lose his hard on from time to time, I think most men in their 40s and 50s that are sexually active are going to lose their hard on from time to time. That said, from my experience I am a 41-year-old female. I am in my 40s. My partner is in his 40s. For the last, you know, several years of my life, you know, any partners I had before my current partner were in their 40s. So I have experience with this age group. And I would say, you know, most of them have this, if you want to call it an issue, I would call it an occurrence from time to time. Now, from my experience, you know, there are some people that have it worse than others, but there's always been a remedy outside of medication for this. And that's just my personal experience. And granted, that's not a huge pool and it's entirely anecdotal, but I still think it's relevant. And I also have the experience of my friends and their pools of people that they're with and their experiences to kind of garner from in this regard, and just also the research and the groups of people that I'm in and their experiences. So, you know, take it for what you will. Again, I'm not a medical doctor. I'm not a psychologist when it comes to any of these things. This is all just my personal opinion. But again, if medication makes you feel good about yourself and that's what you want, then do it. I just think that men are being preyed upon a little bit to feel like they have a dysfunction and they need a medication. I think that it is natural that men in their 40s and 50s, maybe even starting in their 30s, will lose their erections from time to time. I think that there are other remedies other than taking erection medications, pharmaceutical pills, to remedy this. For starters, you know, I know sometimes you can just take a break, or if, you know, there is a break happening in what's going on, or things are moved around, or you switch positions, or, you know, maybe he stops for a minute to pleasure you or whatever, the erection might get lost and maybe it doesn't just snap back. You know, there's things you can do. As a woman, you can go down on a man, give a blowjob. That usually, like, I call that mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. Well, I guess it's not mouth to mouth. You can do mouth to dick resuscitation and get it back. I think most of the time that would probably work for most people. Some people, maybe, oral stimulation is not their favorite. Maybe you could use your hand. Maybe there's something else you could do. Maybe you could, grind against them. I think there's, even just kissing can start to get it back again. But I think that if you put a little bit of effort in, rather than just being like, what? It's not ready to go. And, making the guy feel like he's got a dysfunction or it's his job to always be standing at attention. I think, I expect when I'm with a man that he's going to do things to turn me on and arouse me and get me ready to go. I would expect a man to have the same expectations of me, that I'm responsible for getting him aroused and ready to go, just as he's responsible for getting me aroused and ready to go. So if he's not ready to go in an instant, then it's my job to help his arousal. Just like if I'm not ready to go, it's his job to help me. I think we really have to show up for each other in our sex life and take care of each other. And I think there's lots of things that we can do. And there's even different positions. I think, if a guy maybe isn't at his peak hardness, I think doggy style is a good position to kind of help it get there. For whatever reason, it goes in better, it stays in better. This is, again, my experience. I'm being very candid with all of you today. We're having quite the sex talk, but these are just things that, I've noticed work before. I also, before I was with my current partner, there was a man that I dated who is in his later 40s, and, he was a fit, healthy guy, but he was having some issues getting and maintaining his erection. And at no point did I ever think, he's got erectile dysfunction, he needs medication. But we did talk about what was going on, and I had a couple suggestions. I did a little research. I had a couple suggestions. I was like, hey, can we try a couple things and see if it works? And he was super cool and super open. And so my suggestions of things to try, I was like, one, don't watch porn for a couple weeks and see how that goes, because porn can actually create a desensitization. There's a really great TED talk on porn and how it affects the brain. It's like, it actually affects your brain the same way that methamphetamine does. It's really addictive, and it's actually really not good for you. That said, Jesus, we live in a world where I think most of us watch porn. Like, I'm guilty of watching porn from time to time. No, I shouldn't, but whatever. I'm a human. I don't watch it a lot, but I watch it sometimes. I feel fortunate in that my partner doesn't watch it very often either. Neither one of us do. So I think that kind of keeps us healthy in a way, but a lot of people watch it a lot. And I'm not in any way judging that at all. But I think if you're starting to have issues with maintaining an erection or getting an erection, I think taking a break from porn can actually be really helpful. It kind of gets you back into, you don't need the same level of stimulation to get you where you want to be. So taking a step back from porn is one thing that I suggested for this guy. And he also had taken a break from exercise and working out. So I was like, why don't you, do whatever kind of exercise you like to do a couple times a week, and see, because the exercise makes your testosterone increase, right? So this guy, at the time he was interested in doing some yoga. So he started doing yoga a couple times a week, and he stopped watching porn for a couple weeks. Like, in a couple weeks time, it was already significantly better. And, he was able to get and maintain, for the duration of time that he wanted to. And so he kept up with the exercise. And I think anytime he was feeling like he was having issues, he would take longer breaks from watching porn or just watch less porn overall. And these things worked, and if there was ever a moment where it was lost, it could be gotten back pretty easily, So this is just my experience. I know that there are different things you can do to kind of up your testosterone. Working out, I think, is a big one. There's also supplements. I think, you know, you can look into supplements that help boost testosterone and sex drive and arousal. I'm sure there's some adaptogens that can help with this as well. I love adaptogens personally. If you aren't familiar, look into adaptogens. I think maca is technically an adaptogen, and I think that helps with sexual arousal and testosterone in men, perhaps. So put a freaking little scoop of maca in your coffee or your smoothie or your protein shake or whatever you have. But there are different things. And again, you know, if you feel like medication is best, go for it. But I'm here to say that I don't think losing an erection during sex counts as erectile dysfunction. You know, I think that it's normal and it happens. And this is, you know, welcome to life in your 40s. Jesus. Let's give the guys a break on this one a little bit. And obviously, if you're not able to have satisfying sex because you're unable to get an erection or you're unable to maintain one with any consistency whatsoever, then that would probably constitute needing a little more help, possibly medication, if you're going to have a satisfying sex life. But you could try these other things too and see, you know, stop watching porn, exercise, take some supplements like natural herbal things first and see how that works. And also just have a conversation with your partner. See if, you know, if you lose it, if she's willing to help, and don't feel all this pressure to have this like perfect 20-year-old raging hard-on when you're older, because that's just not how it is. Our bodies change, and that's okay. You know, we're in a different place, and you know, as much as a 20-year-old has that perfect raging hard-on, I'll take a guy in his 40s over that 20-year-old any day, because I want that life experience. You know, I want that person who's lived and seen things. And that's not to discredit the sweet, wonderful 20-year-olds that are out there, but you still have so much life to live. And those of us who have earned our years, you know, I personally like to be with people who have had more years under their belt. Of course, there's always exceptions to every rule, and I know there are people that are wise way beyond their years. So really, I think that the term erectile dysfunction is mostly used in an unfair way. I personally, this is just my personal opinion, I think erectile dysfunction is if you simply cannot get hard and cannot have sex. I would also consider it a type of erectile dysfunction if you can't orgasm, or can't orgasm from sex, or can only orgasm in a very particular way. You know, I've known that to be the case for some people before, and I do think I would call that a dysfunction of sorts, and something that could maybe use a little bit of help. Again, just my personal opinion, but I think that if you lose your heart on a little bit here and there, it's not a dysfunction, and I'm sorry that the world has made men believe this. I hope we as a society can just be a little better on this one front, and instead of making men feel like they have to have this particular type of sexual performance, being more understanding for the reality of, you know, what aging brings and working with it in a more natural and organic, free, loving, understanding type of way. So that's my 2 cents on this. I hope this is helpful for somebody out there. I hope this is helpful for some of you. I would love any questions, comments. If you're too embarrassed to comment in the comment section, then feel free to shoot me an email, debutanterenegade@gmail.com. But I would love to hear your thoughts, experiences, anything that you've been through that you think is relevant. I'm super curious. You know, I think this is a pretty interesting topic. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Have a beautiful rest of your day.